Ready to go deep. Today, we're diving into medieval mysticism, Julian of Norwich, and her revelations of divine love. We're using excerpts from the Project Gutenberg ebook, and let me tell you, you are in for a treat. Picture this. 14th century Julian, an English anchoress, a life of prayer and solitude, has these incredible visions that completely change how she sees God.
It really is amazing. These visions, born from quiet contemplation, they offer insights into faith, suffering, God, and they still resonate with us centuries later.
Right. Like, it's incredible. She balances deep theology with such relatable imagery and compassion.
And that's the thing with Julian's work. It's so compelling because it speaks to your head and your heart.
Okay, so let's get into it. Yeah. Julian's core message, like the foundation of it all, is this. God is love in all things.
Yeah, and she sets this up beautifully. She says, "Truth seeth God, and wisdom beholdeth God, and of these two cometh the third. That is a holy, marveling delight in God, which is love."
It's almost like she's saying love just flows naturally from truly knowing God. I love that. Love is the fruit of true knowledge. And one vision really brings this to life, the vision of God in a point. It's amazing. Julian sees God contained in this tiny point. And through this, she realizes, wait, God's presence is in everything, like even when life feels out of control.
It is powerful.
Julian reminds us God's presence is in every single moment, guiding us towards good.
It's true. Like, think about it. It challenges that feeling of randomness. Instead, God is active in creation. No accidents, no coincidences, just God's love guiding us to something greater.
That makes me think, okay, if God's love is everywhere, what about sin? How does Julian fit sin in with all this boundless love?
Well, this is where Julian's view gets really interesting. She says, sin is no deed, which seems strange, but it's not that sin doesn't matter. It's about its nature, not just the act itself.
Oh, okay, so it's more about what sin means than what we actually do. Help me understand this a little better.
Sure, think of it like a virus attacking a healthy cell. The virus isn't really a thing. It's like a distortion of something good. And that's how Julian sees sin. It's a nodding of goodness, turning away from God's love. It's like choosing to sit in the dark when there's a sunny world outside.
Wow, I like that. So sin isn't this big force, it's a turning away from love. And I guess that doesn't make our chases less serious, but it is a different way to think about them.
Exactly. And in that different way of thinking, there's a really powerful message. Even when we're weak, when we mess up, God's love is still there. We can always step back into the light.
That is reassuring, especially if you're struggling with guilt or shame. It's like Julian is saying, you can wander, but God's love is waiting, ready when you are to come back.
And that leads us to another of Julian's groundbreaking ideas, God as mother.
Yeah, this is something that really makes Julian stand out, particularly for her time. It's so tender and comforting.
Totally. Imagine, she's writing in the 14th century, a time when the view of God was very patriarchal. So to bring this idea of God as nurturing, compassionate mother, that was revolutionary. And she really embraces it, not just a passing thought.
Right. She describes God as nearest, readiest, and surest, which she links to nature, love, and truth.
There's this passage so moving. Julian compares Christ to a mother nourishing her child, feeding us with himself through the Eucharist. She even describes Christ's open side as this incredible, welcoming embrace. It's about a love that goes beyond any human love.
That image is powerful. It speaks to such a deep personal care. I do wonder, though, does she completely leave out the fatherly aspects of God to focus on this mother image?
Not at all. It's not about replacing, but expanding how we see God. She sees God as having both, nurturing mother and the strength of father.
So it's like she's saying God's love goes beyond any earthly limitations. That gives us a lot to think about. How often do we limit our understanding of God based on those traditional roles?
It's a great question. It really challenges us to think bigger, embrace a more expansive view of the divine.
God as mother. It's so rich with meaning, with those images. I definitely want to explore this more.
Me too. It makes you really rethink things, opens up these new ways of seeing the divine.
For sure. And one thing that's so interesting is how Julian connects this image, God as mother, to spiritual nourishment.
Oh yeah, there's a direct connection. Remember, she uses the analogy of a mother feeding her child to describe how God nourishes us.
Right. She says, the mother may give her child suck of her milk, but our precious mother, Jesus, he may feed us with himself and doeth it, full courteously and full tenderly, with the blessed sacrament that is precious food of my life.
Such a powerful image, right? It really takes the idea of communion to a whole new level. Spiritual nourishment, we think of it as abstract, but Julian, she makes it so real you can almost touch it.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like she's saying, God isn't distant, unknowable, but someone who truly cares, who provides for us, just like a loving mother would.
Yes. And that leads us to another image she uses, the image of Christ's open side, this welcoming embrace.
Yeah. She says, our tender mother, Jesus, he may homely lead us into his blessed breast by his sweet open side, and show therein part of the Godhead and the joys of heaven, with spiritual sureness of endless bliss. Such a powerful image, but I don't know, kind of unsettling too, entering into Christ's wounded body.
I think that's part of what makes it so compelling. It's raw, vulnerable, a reminder that God's love, it meets us in our brokenness, in our pain. You know, it speaks to the incarnation, God becoming human, suffering with us.
So it's like Julian saying, to really be close to God, we have to embrace all of human experience, the joy, the sorrow, the light and the dark.
And that is relevant today, don't you think? I mean, we live in a culture that tries to avoid the hard parts of life. But Julian, she reminds us, even in suffering, there's beauty, there's meaning.
And Julian lived through really tough times, right? Plague, war, so much upheaval. She saw the worst of human suffering.
It's true. The Black Death, that time was full of death and despair. Imagine the fear, the uncertainty, everywhere.
But she doesn't focus on despair. Her message is hopeful. I wonder, how does she keep that positive view with all that going on?
Well, I think it shows just how powerful her mystical experiences were. These visions for Julian, they weren't just ideas, they were real. They sustained her. Like she was given a glimpse into this deeper truth, a reality beyond all the pain.
And she found a way to share that, to offer hope to others. Remember that vision, the servant and the Lord? It really shows how hope can come from suffering.
Yes. That vision is so full of symbolism, we could talk about it for hours.
Especially the part about God's double regard. It's a mind-bending concept. God looking outward, pity and compassion for the servant who has fallen, then looking inward, this joy. That's harder to get.
Yeah. Why would God feel joy when humans suffer? It doesn't seem to make sense.
I know. But Julian has this deep insight. God's perspective, it's different from ours. He sees the whole picture, the redemption, even in our brokenness.
Like, he's saying, yeah, this is tough right now, but it's not the end. There's beauty coming, something transformative.
That is hopeful.
Yeah.
It lets us hold on to faith even when things are messy, uncertain.
It's like, you know those optical illusions? You see one thing, then shift your view, and boom, a whole new image. Julian wants us to shift our view, to see our lives through God's love and mercy, even when his plan doesn't make sense.
So it's about trusting the process, even when we don't get it.
That's it. And there's another thing in this vision I find it really interesting. How God looks. The details give us a glimpse into how she saw the divine.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Tell me more about what stood out to you.
Okay, so she describes God on this simple throne in a barren place. His clothes are ample and full seemly. The color is blue as azure, most sad and fair.
Interesting. It's stark, simple, not the usual image of God we see in art, glorious, all-powerful. This feels more intimate, like you could approach him.
I think that's the point. Julian's saying true power isn't about being fancy or rich. It's something deeper.
So God's power is about humility, compassion, being willing to meet us where we are, even when we're broken.
Yes. And then there's his eyes, his expression. She says, black, most fair and seemly, showing full of lovely pity. And he looks merciful. It's like a feeling of tenderness, warmth, like being held in a loving embrace.
Wow. That's so different from that stern, judgmental God that was common back then. It fits with her whole message of love, forgiveness.
Yeah. And remember, this was the time when the church really focused on God's wrath, on eternal damnation.
It must have taken courage to present a different view, to focus on God's mercy and compassion.
Absolutely. And it still challenges us today. She reminds us God isn't this distant, vengeful figure, but loving, wanting what's best for us, even when we mess up.
And speaking of messing up, we can't forget that statement. Sin is no deed. It really makes you think. It challenges what we believe about sin and how it works in our lives.
It's one reason why people still connect with her writing. She tackles the tough questions.
So how do we reconcile this sin is no deed with the very real consequences of our choices?
I think it's about understanding what sin is, not just focusing on what we do. Julian isn't saying actions don't matter, that there aren't consequences. She's trying to change how we see sin at its core.
Okay, so not this big monstrous thing, but a corruption of what's good, turning away from love.
Right. And if we think of sin that way, it can help us be more compassionate to ourselves and to others. It's like Julian is saying, Sin isn't who you are deep down.
So if sin is turning away from God, then healing comes from turning back towards him.
And that's where Julian's emphasis on God's love and mercy is so important. No matter how far we've gone, how many mistakes we've made, God is there, ready to welcome us back.
What a beautiful and freeing message. It's not about our flaws. It's about God's infinite ability to forgive, to heal.
Exactly. It's like she's saying, don't get stuck in your mistakes. Look up. There's a hand reaching out, pulling you back to the light.
And speaking of light, it's time to look at one of the most hopeful parts of Julian's work, God's promises, especially that powerful statement, thou shalt not be overcome.
Yeah, those words are like a lifeline, giving us strength and encouragement, especially when things are tough.
The bold statement given the time she lived in. And she wasn't just talking, she had lived it. Hardship, doubt, fear, she knew it all.
And she came through it with this profound hope. Believing God's love wins in the end. She wasn't saying life would be easy, but we won't be crushed by our struggles.
And it resonates with us today.
Right.
We all face hard things, times of darkness, despair. But Julian's words, they offer hope. We're not alone in our struggles.
Exactly. She's like a wise, compassionate guide, leading us through those hard times, showing us a source of strength that never goes away, resilience, finding the courage to keep going, even when it feels like too much.
And that brings us to another big theme for Julian, patience. God rewards those who stay true to his will, even when they mess up.
This is powerful, especially now. Our world values speed, efficiency. We're told to do more, achieve more, all the time. Julian tells us, slow down, cultivate stillness, be receptive.
Like she's saying, stop trying to force things, control everything. Trust God's timing. He's working things out for your good, even when you don't see it.
Exactly. She wants us to let go of our worries, our fear, our need to micromanage everything. Embrace the mystery of how his plan unfolds. It's radical, but it brings peace, freedom.
I think so many of us crave that, even if we don't realize it. We're so used to striving, we've forgotten how to just be, to be present, to trust that we are where we need to be.
It's a great point. Sometimes the biggest growth comes not from our effort, but from surrender.
We've covered a lot, from God's all-encompassing love to sin's nature, God as mother, the unwavering promise of God. But there's one more piece, Julian's vision of heaven, the ultimate end of our spiritual journey.
Ah, yes. Here's where her mystical insight reaches its peak. She shows us something that goes beyond our earthly limits, a reality where love and joy, they reign supreme.
Heaven. Julian's vision of it, it's always fascinated me. It's like a glimpse into the eternal, but seen through the eyes of a mystic, way back then. What do you think she's trying to say about this ultimate destination?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because she doesn't describe heaven like how we usually picture it. No pearly gates, no clouds. She focuses on a way of being, this fullness, like complete union with God.
So less about a physical place and more about an experience,
Yeah.
a spiritual one.
Yeah, that's it. For Julian, heaven isn't about leaving earth behind. It's about fully experiencing God's presence, which, is already within us. It's like we have a little piece of heaven inside, and after we die, it blossoms, it reaches its full potential.
I love that image. It makes heaven feel closer somehow.
Totally. It's not this far-off, impossible paradise. It's like the culmination of our spiritual journey, coming home to our true selves in God. And what's really amazing, Julian says, we don't earn this. It's pure grace, God's love for us, fulfilled.
Okay, but how does she describe this being fulfilled in God? What words does she use to capture that feeling?
She talks about a marvelous melody of endless love, the soul worshipful entering into the joy of love divine. And she describes the Godhead as endlessly to gladden and to solace his dear worthy friends, full homely and full courteously.
It sounds like overwhelming joy, intimacy, like being completely surrounded by love.
Right, and there's this one passage so powerful. She talks about the soul being taken from all pain, all suffering. She says, suddenly thou shalt be taken from all thy pain, from all thy sickness, from all thy distress, and from all thy woe, and thou shalt come up above, and thou shalt have me to thy meed, and thou shalt be fulfilled of love and of bliss.
Being taken, that image is strong, like you're being pulled out of a storm, carried to safety and peace.
And it's interesting how Julian compares this to the idea of pain just being taken away, which could always come back. Being taken from it entirely, that means complete freedom. And it's not because of us, it's because of God's love.
I noticed that she links this being taken to patience.
You're right. Patience, it's everywhere in her writing. Like it's central to her whole spiritual vision. She says, God rewards those who patiently abide in his will, especially those who lengthen their patience over the time of their living.
Makes you think how we always rush, want the next thing, the next achievement. Julian says, no, true fulfillment, it comes from being present, from trusting God's timing.
It's like she's saying, don't worry, don't try to control everything. Trust his timing. He's working things out for you even when you can't see it.
Yeah, like let go of your worries, your fears, embrace the mystery.
Exactly. Not just agreeing with it in your head, but really living it. A way of being, rooted in love and faith.
Letting God's love change us, heal us, guide us, bring us home. Julian reminds us, even in darkness, there's always light, love that never dies out.
A message that speaks to all of us. A message of hope, comfort when things are tough.
So, as we finish our deep dive into revelations of divine love, I hope you'll think about what we've talked about, explore Julian's work, maybe even question your own understanding of God. You might find your own revelations.
And don't forget, as Julian says, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well.
Until next time.